In Turkey's Şanlıurfa province, at coordinates 37.22 degrees north, 38.92 degrees east, lies a man-made hill that, for millennia, was mistaken for a medieval cemetery. It is a common theme in this part of the world. The most profound secrets are not locked in vaults. They are hidden in plain sight, buried under a thin layer of soil and centuries of assumption. We are here to peel back that layer. Our investigation begins at what is arguably the most significant archaeological site on the planet, Göbekli Tepe. Dated to 9500 BC, this complex of massive T-shaped limestone monoliths predates Stonehenge by nearly 7,000 years. It was constructed by a society that had not yet invented pottery, writing, or the wheel. Ground-penetrating radar suggests at least 20 of these stone circles lie buried, of which only a handful have been excavated. The largest pillars weigh more than 15 tons and are covered in precise, stylized carvings of animals. A single, unfinished monolith in a nearby quarry approaches 50 tons. This was not a conventional settlement. There is little evidence of large-scale habitation, indicating it was a temple, a ritual center, built by hunter-gatherers with a level of social organization previously thought impossible for the era. And this is where the official story begins to fray. One pillar in particular, number 43, has become a focus of intense academic debate. Researchers from the University of Edinburgh propose that the carvings, a scorpion, a vulture, a headless man, are not merely totems. They argue it is a celestial map, a snapshot of the sky marking the constellations of Sagittarius, Scorpio, and Libra. More than that, they claim it is a date stamp, recording a cataclysmic comet impact around the year 950 BC, an event which may have triggered the Younger Dryas Cold period, a record of a global catastrophe carved in stone by a pre-literate people. It is a staggering hypothesis, but it might explain the site's greatest enigma. Around 8000 BC, after 500 years of use, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately, carefully, and completely buried. Its creators packed millions of cubic feet of dirt, stone, and animal bone into every enclosure, entombing their own monument. The question is not just why they built it. It is why they went to such extraordinary lengths to hide it. Were they preserving a message, a warning, for a future that could finally understand it? Or were they burying something they feared? This act of deliberate concealment is our entry point, the first loose thread in a tapestry of forgotten knowledge woven across Anatolia. This act of deliberate concealment is a recurring theme in Anatolia. But while the builders of Göbekli Tepe buried a temple, others buried themselves. We move 450 kilometers west to Nevşehir province at coordinates 38.40 degrees north, 34.73 degrees east, into the semi-arid heartland of Cappadocia. Here, the impulse to hide was not a final act of preservation, but a fundamental principle of survival. We are not looking at a structure, but an anti-structure. An entire city, excavated downwards into the soft volcanic tuff. This is Derinkuyu. It was rediscovered by accident in 1963 when a local resident knocked down a wall in his basement and found a passageway. It is not every day your home renovation uncovers a lost metropolis. Derinkuyu descends 85 meters into the earth, a subterranean complex of at least 18 distinct levels, engineered to house an estimated 20,000 individuals, along with their livestock and food supplies. This was not a temporary bunker. It was a permanent, self-sufficient underground society. The logistics are staggering. A complex network of ventilation shafts, some plunging more than 55 meters from the surface, provided air to the lowest floors. A communal well, not connected to the surface to prevent poisoning, supplied water. There were stables, wine and oil presses, storage cellars, chapels, and even a large missionary school with a barrel-vaulted ceiling. But the most telling feature is its security. Key passageways are blocked by massive circular stone doors weighing up to 500 kilograms each. They could be rolled into place from the inside only, sealing the inhabitants off from whatever was on the surface. while later expanded by early Christians fleeing Roman and then Arab persecution. The city's origins are much older, with most evidence pointing to Phrygian engineers in the 8th century BC. The question is not who lived here, but what they were hiding from. An army can be defeated, a siege can be broken, but to drive 20,000 people, to engineer a life entirely devoid of sunlight, suggests a threat that was persistent, inescapable, and terrifyingly patient. A society does not build a city like Derinkuyu as a precaution. They build it out of necessity. We move east to the semi-arid highlands of Adiyaman Province at coordinates 38.04 degrees north, 38.74 degrees east. The necessity that drove 20,000 people underground at Derinkuyu is a powerful force. But what happens when that same impulse for preservation is not driven by fear but by ego? When the goal is not to hide from the world but to command its attention for eternity. This is Mount Nemrut. At an altitude of 134 meters, we find a man-made mountain piled on top of a natural one. This is the Hierothesion, or holy seat, of Antiochus I, ruler of the minor Hellenistic kingdom of Commagene in the 1st century BC. The conical peak is a tumulus, a 50-meter-high, 150-meter diameter mound of fist-sized, crushed limestone rocks, and it is entirely artificial. Guarding it are the remains of colossal statues, each 8 to 9 meters tall. On one side sits Antiochus himself, flanked by a syncretic pantheon of his own design: Zeus Oromastus, Apollo Mithras, Heracles Artanies. The intent was to elevate himself into the celestial order. Earthquakes have long since decapitated these silent gods, and their 2-meter-high heads now sit on the terrace below, a surreal and unsettling audience. But the statues are merely the greeting party. The true mystery is the tumulus itself. It is, by all accounts, the king's tomb, a burial chamber designed to be unbreachable. For over 2 millennia, it has succeeded. Modern geophysical surveys using ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography have detected anomalies and possible voids within the mound, but the results are inconclusive. Any attempt at direct excavation risks a catastrophic collapse of the nearly 300,000 cubic meters of loose rock, obliterating whatever it is that Antiochus so desperately wanted to protect. If you find this forensic approach to history compelling, consider subscribing to our channel. The evidence we're examining only gets more complex from here. The ultimate paradox of Nemrut is that Antiochus built one of the ancient world's most audacious public monuments to broadcast his legacy, yet at its heart is a secret that remains perfectly, and perhaps permanently, kept. The Lycians relied on written threats and municipal fines to protect their eternal rest, a system of rules to manage the unknown. Our investigation now moves over 950 kilometers east to the Sirnak province, near 37.33 degrees north, 42.18 degrees east, where in the 12th century one man sought not to ward off spirits, but to build them from brass and copper. His name was Badi al-Zaman al-Jazari, chief engineer for the Artuqid court. In 1206, he completed a manuscript titled The Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. This is not a theoretical text. It is a detailed, illustrated instruction manual for constructing over 100 different machines, 50 of which are detailed with a precision that allows for modern reconstruction. And within these pages lies a ghost, not of the supernatural, but of the mechanical. Al-Jazari created what are arguably the world's first programmable humanoid automata. One documented device was a musical band of 4 robotic musicians on a boat, designed to entertain royal guests. The mechanism was driven by a rotating camshaft with pegs that would trip levers, operating percussion instruments. By physically moving the pegs, the rhythm and drum pattern could be altered. This is the foundational principle of programmability, 8 centuries before the digital age. He also engineered a waitress automaton that could serve water, and a hand-washing automaton with a flushing mechanism. His famous elephant clock was a 4-meter-high animated diorama involving Indian, Egyptian, Chinese, and Greek figures, all moving in concert to mark the passage of a half hour. These weren't just clocks or toys. They were complex systems designed to mimic life. The ghost in Al-Jazari's machines is this uncanny spark of autonomy, the moment an inanimate object performs a complex, human-like task without direct human intervention. He was building artificial life, not for industry, but for wonder. And in his meticulous schematics, he left behind the DNA for a new kind of existence. We move 100 kilometers west to the Fatih district of Istanbul province at 41.008 degrees north, 28.978 degrees east, and 6 centuries backward in time. Where Al-Jazari constructed new meaning from schematics, the engineers of Emperor Justinian I constructed a new reality from the literal ruins of the old. Beneath what was once the Stoa Basilica, they excavated a space designed to hold 80,000 cubic meters of water for the Great Palace. The Basilica Cistern, completed around 532 AD, is a subterranean forest of 336 marble columns, each 9 meters tall. For centuries after the Ottoman conquest, it was completely forgotten, until a 16th century scholar noticed local residents lowering buckets through holes in their basements to retrieve fresh water and occasionally fish. The columns themselves are a catalogue of recycled history, a practice known as spoliation. Most were plundered from older Roman structures, a chaotic mix of Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian styles. But in the far northwest corner of this 800 square meter space, 2 columns have bases that are not architectural. They are mythological. They are 2 massive blocks carved into the head of Medusa. Their origin is unknown, but they are clearly repurposed from a late Roman edifice. The mystery is not their presence, but their orientation. One is placed on its side. The other is fully inverted. The pragmatic explanation is that they were simply the correct size to serve as plinths, and their positioning was irrelevant to the engineers. A second theory proposes a deliberate symbolic act. To negate the petrifying power of the Gorgon's gaze, these pagan icons were intentionally desecrated, turned on their side and upside down, before being buried in the foundations of a new Christian capital. They are not art, they are evidence, silent records of a choice made 500 years ago, leaving us to decipher whether we are looking at an act of pure practicality or a subtle architectural exorcism. We move from an act of subterranean subterfuge to one of celestial ambition, traveling 100 kilometers east to the Makkah district of Trabzon province at 40.690 degrees north, 39.658 degrees east, where the engineers of the Basilica Cistern buried their pagan relics. The builders of the Sumala Monastery sought to escape the world entirely. The monastery is an architectural impossibility, a 72-room complex clinging to a sheer cliff face in the Pontic Mountains, 300 meters above the valley floor. Its founding narrative, dating to 386 AD, involves 2 monks discovering a miraculous icon of the Virgin Mary inside a natural cave. But the physical reality is more compelling than the legend. For 600 years, this structure served not just as a sanctuary, but as a significant center of scholarship. This brings us to the myth of its lost library. The term is misleading. It suggests a single, cohesive collection that simply vanished. The reality is a story of slow, inexorable dispersal. Sumela was a prolific scriptorium, a place where manuscripts were not only stored, but meticulously copied and created. Its true value was not as a vault, but as a factory of knowledge. The loss occurred in 1923 with the compulsory population exchange between Greece and Turkey. The monastery was abandoned. Its library, a collection built over a millennium and a half, was not burned or buried in a single cataclysmic event. It was scattered. Today, manuscripts confirmed to originate from Sumela are catalogued in Ankara, Athens, St. Petersburg, and as far west as Dublin. The mystery, then, is not a treasure hunt for a hidden room of scrolls. It is a forensic reassembly of a shattered intellectual world, an attempt to reconstruct a library that now exists only as disconnected data points across the museums of half a continent. The attempt to reconstruct a library from scattered data points is a modern, intellectual exercise. Our final investigation requires a more fundamental reconstruction, rewinding 9,000 years to the Konya Plain in central Anatolia at approximately 37.667 degrees north, 32.830 degrees east. Here we are not piecing together a collection of books, but the very concept of a city. This is Catalhoyuk, and it is a settlement that systematically dismantled every assumption we hold about urban life. First, there are no streets. There are no alleyways, no public squares, no avenues. The city, home to an estimated 7,000 people at its peak, was a single, continuous honeycomb of mud brick dwellings, each built directly against its neighbors. Access was not lateral, but vertical. Residents entered their homes through an opening in the roof, climbing down a ladder. This design effectively turned the entire settlement into a fortress, but it also created a social dynamic we can barely comprehend. The rooftops were the public thoroughfares, the social spaces, the city's main street elevated by one story. Excavations across its 18 distinct settlement layers have revealed another profound anomaly. There are no palaces, no temples, no administrative buildings. The dwellings are strikingly uniform in size and design, suggesting a radically egalitarian society that persisted for over a millennium. But the most unsettling discovery lies beneath the floors. The people of Catalhoyuk buried their dead directly under their living spaces. Multiple generations of a family would be interred beneath the sleeping platforms. In some cases, heads were removed from skeletons, plastered to resemble living faces, and handled by the community before being buried again. This was not a city with a cemetery. The city was the cemetery. The living and the dead coexisted in a physical intimacy that erases the line between home and tomb, making Catalhoyuk less a city for the living and more a perpetual machine for processing ancestry.